Zando Penguin Audio presents The Burial Tide by Neil Sharpson, narrated by Aidan Kelly. To Aoife, always together through stormy weather. Chapter 1. Singing. A woman's voice cooing gently to her in the darkness. Tá mé mohi o dairi gan gala go réir. The words were Irish. She couldn't quite find the meaning, like her mind was fumbling for coins in the dark. Abruptly, the singing stopped. Where am I? Why am I here? She forced her eyes open, but saw nothing. Pitch black. Hands flew to her face, and the dry, rough calluses of her fingertips pushed at her open eyes, and she hissed in pain. So I'm alive. She blinked away angry red and purple stars. And not blind, just in total, utter darkness. Where am I? There was no sound except her own breathing, and a strange, gentle rumbling. She reached out and hit soft fabric, backed by hard wood. No, this wasn't real. It couldn't be. She was cocooned, entombed. A coffin. As the panic rose, she kicked and punched and headbutted. What's the worst thing that could ever happen to you? This. Buried alive. She laughed, and the sound skittered around the wooden walls like a panicked rat. She sounded mad. Fuckers! She screamed. Who was she screaming at? Whoever did this to her. This didn't just happen. The air was getting thick and fat with the sweat of her own breath, and she tried not to think of her brain cells slowly suffocating, her very consciousness rotting away like spoiled meat. You've been buried alive. You've been buried alive. You've been buried alive. If you're going to do something, do it now. She yelled. She kicked. She punched, knuckles bloody, knees bruised and aching, toes broken and twisted. You're going to die. You're going to die. You're going to die. A crack. Something breaking. Maybe the wood. Maybe her. Exhausted, her hands flopped down beside her and her finger brushed against something solid in her pocket. She didn't want to feel hope. It would just cut all the deeper when it proved false. She stuck her aching fingers into the tight denim pocket and pulled it out. A phone. She screamed in joy, activated the screen, and winced as it lit up. The wallpaper was a picture of a woman with long, dark hair kissing the cheek of a brown-haired man with a big, innocent grin and slightly crooked teeth. They were standing on a beautiful beach with clear, blue sky above them. The picture seemed to mock her, given the situation. The screen was fuzzing over with droplets of condensation as the air grew hotter and more humid. A notification for a missed call popped up. Ma'am, 1 minute ago. She pressed call, clamping the phone to her ear, and everything went dark again. She could feel tears running down her cheeks. The calling tone sounded weird somehow, too harsh, too metallic, almost hissing. Or maybe she couldn't trust anything she heard. Maybe she was already half brain dead. Suddenly the tone ended, and she heard a voice. She expected that ma'am would be a woman, but the voice was male. Oh. That was all it said. But in that one vowel there was so much contempt, so much hate, so much indignation and shock that she'd even dared to call. Oh, it's you. With her last good lungful of air, she screamed, Get me out! And then, as if her voice was a clenched fist, she heard a crack overhead. A drop of water dribbled onto her chin. And then another. It turned into a stream. Another crack. She realized what the strange murmuring sounds had been. Torrential rain. Raindrops falling onto the soil of her fresh grave. The earth on top of her getting steadily wetter and heavier. When she kicked and punched the lid, she must have cracked the wood, weakening it, which meant the world broke open. She was drowning in thick, soupy mud. It filled her nose and ears and tried to swim down her throat. She managed to get her legs underneath her, onto the wooden base of the coffin. She pushed up, hoping to God that there was a sky somewhere up there, that there was air somewhere up there. She kicked and clawed and writhed out of the earth like a maggot emerging from the rotted flesh of an apple. And then she was out. She lay there, spitting up mud, clinging to the lip of the grave as the rain poured down and washed the dirt from her body. The coffin, like some hungry animal, wasn't ready to let her go, and she almost slipped back inside. But she dug in, fingers clamped to the earth, and she yanked herself forward until she was free of the trench. The strangest thing? Lying there, half dead, in a pitch-black graveyard with an ocean's worth of rain bucketing down on her, she felt only euphoria. She had the only thing she needed to be happy. Air. Chapter 2. She lay at the edge of the grave, this woman, shivering and alone. The rain stopped with a stunning abruptness. Absently, her pale fingers wormed through the filthy water as she sifted through her mind, trying to find her name. But all she could remember was the hatred of the man's voice on the phone, as if she'd done him some terrible wrong. Her memory felt like a house that had been flooded, and all the vital documentation, passports, and family photos were floating around in dark, murky water. She could only hope that it would pass. Slowly, trembling, rainwater and mud shivering off her arms, she got to her feet and looked into her grave. It was a strange feeling to look into one's own grave. There was no headstone, no cross, nothing to mark her. Perhaps it was too soon, or perhaps she had not been deemed worthwhile. She cast a glance around the cemetery. The clouds had cleared, and the relic was now bathed bone-white by the light of the moon and an ancient lamppost. It was a seclusive and crouching little field, where stone tablets and Celtic crosses stood crookedly among the trees and brambles. A tiny church overlooked the graves, and the whole affair was roped off by a white stone wall. It was very early morning, almost dawn. She could taste that in the air. The only sound she could hear was the hum of the lamppost, like damage in the ear, and the rustle of the sea tossing lazily in its sleep. She must be near the shore, she decided. It is exactly the kind of place I would have wanted to be buried, she thought. But I think that's been spoiled for me now. She looked down and felt a jolt of guilt. Her bare feet stood on another fresh grave, her toes penetrating deep into the soil shroud. She stepped off and saw that her own grave was but one of 4. 4 newly dug graves, all unmarked. For a second, she considered getting down on her knees and pressing her ear to the sodden ground to see if she could hear muffled screams and fingernails raking pine. But she didn't. The ground was practically soup, yet that was not the reason. She was already as filthy as a body could be, but something in her blood warned her away. Perhaps, she thought to herself, she was not a very good person. But her phone. She could call for help. Plunging her hands into the open grave, she found the hard rectangle. She tapped it harshly with muddy, cold fingers, but it refused to so much as flicker. With a snarl of rage, she flung it at the stone wall, and it splintered and skittered. But there was another sound, too,
Sample complete. Ready to continue?